Okay, we're going live with our stream.
I can. I'm already going to talk to Mrs. Jarvis's. She's. Yeah. Send me an email. I will.
Time? Yep, you're good.
I don't have that meeting up yet.
Yeah.
So
On YouTube.
Mhm.
Just type in USD 417.
Yeah, on a page.
Link.
Yeah, can you G-chat it to me?
Here's it. I'll just read it to you. Type it in. I copy G-chat it to you. I guess. Let me get official here. There. Should be coming. Don't do that one. This one, I took off the Q. Okay, there you go. Try it.
Video unavailable.
Last.
All right.
Would you like
I got it. And get it muted on YouTube.
Okay, all right, we're good. All right, 5:40, we'll go ahead and call the September meeting of the Board of Education for USD 417. To order.
Hey, Ross,
We'll
come on in. You ready?
start with the R&R hearing.
Okay, so first of all, welcome, Miles. Technically, this is what we're doing right now. It's called a revenue neutral rate hearing. So we're going to offer information to the public, anybody that comes and has questions over the process we're getting ready to do. So just sit back and enjoy this process. All right. So real quick, let me throw up a revenue neutral rate. If you remember this year, due to some legislative changes, that now the county clerk will issue what's called a revenue neutral rate to us in July. We have to have back to her what our intended mill rate is going to be if we're going to go above a revenue neutral rate. And so you passed a resolution in July. We'll reaffirm that resolution tonight. Based on these numbers, if you look up here, this is what the county clerk turned in to us. Our revenue neutral rate for the general fund is 19.288 mils. By statute, we have to collect 20 mils. So we have to go above our revenue neutral rate regardless of our other funds, just for our general fund alone, because by state statute, we have to collect 20 mils of property taxes. So that number over here, then you'll see to the far left for 2021 in this column, we are estimating 20 mils by statute. We can't go above that. We can't go below that. It's strictly 20 mils. That's going to generate approximately $1.2 million in funds that will be sent to the state, and then the state redistributes those funds based on the finance formula for school finances, based on how many kids are in attendance and weighting factors. So we have to go above a revenue neutral rate for that fund. If we choose to go above revenue neutral rate in our other funds, we are proposing to the board that currently our revenue neutral rate is 7.745 mils. Our statutory limit for capital outlay is 8 mils. So 8 mils will generate $555,000. If we stayed at our revenue neutral rate, it'd generate $542,666,000. And then the same thing in all other funds. The two funds that we would have on here would be our supplemental general fund and our bond and interest fund. So we are proposing, you'll see our revenue for supplemental general dropped greatly, and that's due to the lake lawsuit and the redistribution of funds back to the district through what was being withheld. That is now done. So it's the last time we see that type of change in those numbers. But in order to keep our mill levy flat, not raise our mills, we upped our bond and interest by about 4 mils to collect more money, because the intent there is we'll pay that bond off sooner, which will save our patrons a significant amount of dollars in interest on that bond. So instead of letting the bond go the full length, we'll be able to pay it off sooner by collecting mills. So it shouldn't be, we're not raising the mill rate. We're just shifting from LOB because of reimbursement back through the tax credit of the funds that were withheld. Shifting at the bond and interest, we'll collect more, we'll pay it off sooner. That will balance out, as this year they won't withhold any funds. We received all of our refunds. Nothing else will be given back to the school district withheld. What we will have to start planning on as we get more into that, finding out the findings of that lawsuit, how we'll plan to repay that if we do need to repay any of those taxes. But the state will work with us on that to develop a structure to do that. So what we're proposing to the board is to go 20 mils for our general fund by statute, 8 mils in our capital outlay, and 15.116 mils for supplemental, which is down from the 19.033 we did before last year, and 15.51 mils in bond and interest, which is up the 4 mils from the previous year, just because that will keep our mill rate flat, basically. So that puts us at a total of 30.63 mils. We were at a total of 30.613 last year. Generates a total revenue, estimated tax revenue of 2.1 million in other funds, and then what you see above there, the 1.2 million in general fund and $500,000 in capital outlay funds. Questions on revenue neutral rate? Now, the next hearing, so all we got to do now is just approve, the board needs to approve for us to go above a revenue neutral rate, which is reaffirming this resolution. Our next hearing is the traditional hearing you're used to, where you just approve the budget that we propose.
Mr. President, I move we reaffirm the resolution that was adopted on the 12th day of July, 2021, expressing the property taxation policy of USD 417 Morris County with respect to exceeding the revenue neutral tax rate for financing the annual budget for 2021-2022.
Right. Been moved and seconded that we reaffirm the resolution that was passed before.
Yeah.
I remember when now, July?
Yeah,
Just
use the
went
date on
blank there
there.
for a
There we
second. Discussion on that item. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed. All right.
During this meeting, and in 2 minutes, start the budget hearing.
Okay. This one will be adjourned and we will start again in 2 minutes for the budget hearing.
Mr. Denny, you got one
They're
there.
gonna say,
Yeah,
I'm gonna need some chairs.
It's Daniel.
There's quite a few of them out here.
They're not gonna be here, so grab the whole phone.
Your front soon. Testify.
I think I have one more coming. Let's practice. Yeah, you guys are popular.
That was talking about.
That's hardly what I would call us.
Because I saw the message that said Terry was coming.
Right, well, we forgot I have a bag for you.
Small space of windows. People here.
All right, I show it to be 5:50, so we'll go ahead and call the hearing on the published 2021-2022 budget meeting to order. Jody?
All right, so I've shared in the past the code 99 in the budget, so let me throw our code 99 back up. We can go through other parts of the budget if needed. So feel free to ask questions on that if we need to, but this code 99 basically sums up, and Mike is here, she can answer any questions as well. This basically shows what we're levying in each fund. We already know the mill rate that requires to levy those funds. So you can see what our proposed budget is. Reminder is that what you approve tonight is not what you approve to spend, it's what you give us authority to spend, because in public education, we can only spend what we have authority to spend, and that process is done through what we notice in the paper and then what you approve tonight. So you'll notice, for instance, like in capital outlay, our expenditures for this year, our proposed budget is our entire amount. We won't spend $2.4 million, but we want the authority to do that, because if we would have a tragic accident, like a tornado comes through or a windstorm comes through and rips all our roofs off, and while we're waiting for insurance to come in, we have to fix things, or we got to move mobile units in. We need cash to be able to do that. If we don't approve for all that authority, we can't spend it, even though it's sitting in the bank that we have in cash reserve. So you'll notice every year, this is common practice amongst all school districts, you approve the full authority, just in case you have an issue, but then we actually budget and spend based on what our means are after our September 20th count. So true budgeting comes after our September 20th count, because that's when we know actually how many dollars we're getting. This is just an estimation based on trends, based on what our previous weighting factors have been, based on our previous enrollment factors have been. We get a better picture after enrollment happens, but this was already done obviously before enrollment happened. We look at our at-risk numbers and all those different transportation weightings, at-risk weightings and so forth, and come up with our best estimate for the budget. And then after September 20th count, and then after actually our audit's done with KSD, we know our true budget will be for that year, and then we adjust based on those numbers. So basically what you're approving tonight is the authority to spend public tax dollars up to these amounts listed here in this budget. And you can see if you go through by line again, code 6 is our general fund. That was the 20 mills we levy by state statute. So we're proposed to have $7.4 million in expenditures on that. From that, you'll notice we're only levying $1.2 million in taxes. The rest of that's made up through like equity aid and so forth. We get different amounts of aid based on the school finance formula that talks about equity in education. So part of that will be offset by other tax dollars throughout the state and on our local taxpayers. Same thing with supplemental general fund and our capital outlay fund. Then bonded interest is listed down here a little further under debt services on line 62. You can see there what 15 mills generates a little over $1 million. So questions on anything in the proposed budget that we went over last time, or anything from tonight that came up since last time? This is a hearing, so this is time anybody from the crowd can ask a question if they'd like. It's clear as mud. Isn't it? Yeah.
Miles, there will be a quiz next time.
Just to kind of give some perspective, I guess, since we have the time. I mean, as you know, the way we go through this, it's quite a lengthy process. We sit down and start with what our tax collection rates are, and that bases everything off of what we project out. So we look and see what our tax collection rates are in Morris County. There's two different ways we look at it, because there's actually a tax process. Some runs off the calendar year. We run off the fiscal year. So there's 6 months of tax and process for certain items like vehicle taxes and so forth that are collected from our June fiscal year to the end of the calendar year in December. And then we look at how those funds are generated, and then we offset any delinquent taxes or neighborhood revitalization taxes with our tax collection rate. So we offset that and adjust those percentages. So we want to make sure at the end of the day, we can fund our budget. That's the main thing is if we, even though we may need the X amount of dollars to fund the budget, if we don't levy enough taxes, we only get the funds that we levy for. So if we need $10 million, but we only levy enough taxes to generate $9 million, we only get $9 million. So it's really important that mill rate is extremely important to have accurate for a tax collection rate to fund whatever the amount we propose to need in our budget. A lot of it, most of it is salaries. About 80% of the school district's budget salaries. And we pay salaries out of all accounts, mainly general fund and supplemental. We do pay some out of capital outlay. You can pay some maintenance salaries out of capital outlay with the change in the law several years ago. Mike, do you have anything to add?
All right, anybody have any questions? Okay. Scott, do you have something?
No, I just preparing for a vote.
Okay.
Mr. President, I move we approve the budget as published.
Been moved and seconded that we approve the budget published. Any further discussion on that item? All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? So passed. Looks like we've got about 4 minutes before we'll start the regularly scheduled meeting at 6 p.m.
So we adjourn this hearing.
So we will adjourn this one and we'll fire it up again here at 6 o'clock. Somebody out there brought some, right?
Have you seen the picture of your wife? Have you? Oh my, that's funny. Mrs. Powell getting arrested during our imaginative play center. The preschoolers
Oh, I
were
have seen
arresting
that
your wife.
picture,
Mrs. Short, you need to plug in.
It looks like my son is like reading her rights
Yeah.
there.
Her chair was on fire. And she was
Not why we're drinking that.
Get you in the Zoom meeting and then you share it.
He's gonna put something on that.
There you go.
That's-
Why did I get-
Yeah, this is not projector.
We're not gonna order him his
Well,
official
but it's
student
not-
thing.
don't worry about it. Right now, we'll leave that on that computer to broadcast this.
I was just gonna write a crayon.
We get you.
No, so just-
Awesome.
On the border of the miles with an arrow pointing down.
Hey, he wasn't joking about that quiz, by the way.
Marcus, yours is only about 4 pages. Don't make it sound worse than it is.
Yeah. I know it should happen.
It's at least 80
Just
multiples.
listen.
Basic stuff.
We have to pare it down if they're under 18.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty similar to ACT prep.
Yeah.
Big one.
Take a small primer course. Then the actual test. Tracy, I just.
You don't have to do anything.
Just don't have it yet.
I'm not acting as one of these guys. I'll take the pictures. That's my seat. I can't stand you. I got long legs and I whack them on the table. I like to lean back.
You squirm.
I swear.
I'm sorry. Join without audio. That is the worst. Oh my God, that's a terrible.
You knew it was coming before it actually.
I did.
Would you like me to talk a lot?
Yeah, I guess
Right
I
over
just
here,
got
just stay on Oh, now you're right.
That's her.
That's my other person.
I can't.
Talk about the spirit part.
That's not my department. You know that. That's Cal's department.
Yeah.
The only thing you haven't done is.
I told you that if I promised I wouldn't. All right, we are at 6 o'clock. So we'll go ahead and call this regular meeting of the Board of Ed to order. Quite a few of us here tonight. Welcome, everyone. We'll go ahead and run through some introductions. That way Bryce knows everybody that's here. So I'm Terry Powell.
Tina Ray Scott.
Ray Blythe.
Mary Myers.
Heather Hummus.
Valerie Gear.
Jade Warrenboss.
Kelsey Bremer.
Dana Reddick.
Kate Gronquist. Nola Miller.
Kelly McDiffit.
Tracy Schroeder.
Kala Unruh.
Marcus Fernandez.
Miles yet.
Aaron Doty.
Bryce Johnson.
Scott.
Scott Bankus.
Adam
Dirks.
Thanks, everyone. We do have a new member at our table tonight. So Mr. Doty, I'll give you a second to introduce him.
Great. We'd like to welcome Mr. Miles Gant. He was selected to be our student board liaison, so he'll be joining us at our meetings and offering a perspective from a student point of view for any issues that we want to discuss and have input on from him. And so we welcome him and thank you for the time to be here and dedicating yourself to doing this, because it is a process, but I think it'll be very educational for you and it'll be beneficial for us to have a student here providing that point of view. So welcome. Glad to have you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, so tonight we'll start with the consent agenda, and tonight's consent agenda includes the approval of the agenda, approved minutes of previous meetings, financial report, pay bills, donations and gifts, personnel, some employment of Addison Bakura, 7-hour cook, Jessica Bookman, Council Grove Junior Senior High School, 7-hour cook, Kim Sample, Council Grove Elementary School pre-K ASP aide, Janelle Wertz, a district nurse's aide, resignations of Kimberly Ohm as a 7-hour cook, and Wendy Dietrich as a Council Grove Elementary School pre-K ASP aide. Anything anybody like to see removed from the consent agenda or moved?
Mr. President, I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I second it.
Moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda as presented. Discussion on that item. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Patron forum. Anybody here want to address the board this evening? All right. Spotlight on education. I believe we have the robotics team here tonight to give us a little update.
Okay, so. Okay. There we go. Okay, not sure what the best way about this is. First off, thank you very much for having us this evening, because this is a part of our competition. I think this is like getting out into the community and really promoting our program. This is our 11th year. Doesn't seem like it. We've been doing it for a really long time now. And last year was all virtual, so we're really excited to be back in person this year. Hopefully everything goes well and we're able to have a game day in person. There's two parts of the competition, and one of the reasons is that we're here is you can either just build the robot and write the notebook, or you can do what we do is like the best competition. So it encompasses everything that these guys are going to talk about. It ends up being quite a big thing. So when Jay said, well, you have 10 minutes, and it's like, okay, you guys have to talk fast. There's a lot that goes into it. And there's a lot of preparation and everything that goes with it. I don't know if my click is going to click. So I don't think I did. There we go. Oh no, I'm going backwards. Okay, there we go. I'll have to just click for you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to them. because the competition prefers them to do it rather than me, which is excellent. I guess you could try quickly. And Caleb's not very excited. Not thrilled at all. I'll click for you if it doesn't click.
So we build a robot that we take to game day and it competes in different competition. Well, only one competition every year, but.
We thought you and I was going to be good.
I wasn't prepared to talk about this one.
Improvise, you're good, you're fine.
I've been trying to improvise.
He's on it.
We build a robot out of materials that they give us, and it has to go through a competition.
These are our material kits, and that is Eli freshman year, fun fact. Your clicker is not working.
I don't know what's wrong.
The programming team will take pretty much just the PlayStation or Xbox controller and essentially just hook it up to the robot and then tell the people who drive the robot on game day what different buttons do and like how to drive it.
Okay, so the notebook team is basically a group of people who write a big paper. It explains how the robot works, what we do, kind of a little bit about our team. And there's also usually a research paper that goes along with the theme that you have to do. It's a very intense thing. It's usually quite big. I don't usually write it, but somebody else.
What's this year's theme?
Well, we don't know yet. Kickoff hasn't happened, but from our teaser, it's something to do with demolition. So
It's unclear what I'm supposed to do.
So the CAD team basically make this picture. It is in New Ink, I think. And so they make this picture for our booth and notebook. It's not required, but we always do it because it looks cool. So the CAD team this year also has to do the modeling challenge, which is new. We don't completely know what it is. And then the engineering drawings challenge, which I presume is similar to the CAD itself.
What
I don't
software
do
do you
this, so
use?
I can't explain this that much.
What software do you use to draw the pictures with?
MathWorks.
Afterwards, that's a good question. I can talk about this one. Okay, so the marketing team, we basically go to Wichita and we sit in front of a panel of judges and we try and sell them our robots. So this was 2 years ago. We were selling our robots. There were 2 judges. The theme was like natural disaster, and we had to tell them why our robot was the best. And we did pretty good because we got second in marketing that year, which was pretty cool. The public relations, that's what I do. We promote our program, basically. That is why we are here. So at game day, we do team interviews. This is our booth. So the judges come to our booth and they ask us a bunch of questions like how BEST has influenced us and all that good stuff. And we have to tell them all about our program, kind of explain the game to them and explain how our booth matches that. It's very fun. And then the spirit team, they're in charge of being loud, of course. They make t-shirts, noise, lots of fun. We usually take the band. It's very loud on game day, so you have to be loud to witness hear it.
So what's the design there? What was the?
That is 2 years ago, I think.
That was 2 years ago.
That was the natural disaster game. So it's like a power pole and an arrow with the house.
The goal of that game was to rebuild the power grid and,
Yeah.
and that kind of tied in with our.
I know this one. The Minecraft challenge was last, I'm assuming that's the same this year, but I'm not sure. Last year it was, started out with nothing. You had 48 hours and you had to build a clinic in your patients of COVID-19. And like I said, I'm not sure if it's gonna be the same this year, but it might be.
So school encouraged you to play Minecraft.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I'm good with it. I just want to make sure.
It was actually a really cute game. Like
I'll bet.
all the villagers had COVID, so we had to go test them and then we had to cure them and we had to build a hospital.
Yeah, great.
So was that in place of last year, more of the physical stuff that you couldn't go to meets and stuff? Is that what?
They added a lot of new things last year because we were virtual, but they kept a lot of it. Like all of the things in there that says new, that was all new last year. And I don't know what the literature is. Like the modeling challenge, the video design challenge is, actually I'm not sure what the video design challenge is. That's completely new. The skills knowledge is kind of a trivia, like science concepts and the game concepts. The engineering design contest is the thing that we build in CAD. Ideally, we're gonna link that up with our program and be able to draw it virtually in a virtual environment. So what we design in our CAD, now we should be able to take and move around. Same thing with the autonomous. The autonomous is you hit play and hopefully your robot goes and plays the game. So there's a lot of new stuff this year. But yeah, there's a lot of new things this year. Oh, that's what when game day was. Game day is November 20th. You will all be getting invitations to come down to Wichita and come visit us. It's a really incredible thing if you've never been to a robotics competition. It's
very loud and there's a lot happening.
loud is the word.
You have any questions for us?
So what's your favorite part, each of you? Tell me what do you look forward to most this year, Robotics Club?
I'm just excited we get to build an actual booth because last year I had to figure out how to do a website and I had no clue what I was doing. So this year I get to do something I know how to do.
What about you, Kate?
Probably game day.
Last year was pretty like anticlimactic. Like it was just we were done and we didn't have a game day and we were pretty excited to be able to go back and
But hey, we got second overall, so.
we did. We ended up second overall. This year, I think typically we have 30 to 40 teams. I think this year we're around 20. There's a little bit lower number than normal, but we'll see how that goes.
How many kids are signed up for Robotics Club this year?
Right now I have 37. We'll see how that. We did not offer candy at the Braves Fest, and so that was like a big comment. I was like, well, if you don't have candy, I'm not signing up. We don't want you if we have to break your candy. We don't have time for that. But we had 37 sign up, so we'll see. It'll probably end up around 20. That's usually about where we fit everybody in. So.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Moving on then to reports. Anybody have any questions for the administrators of the reports that were sent? Administrators, you have any updates? All right, Bryce, you have anything? Mr. Doty?
Couple things real quick. Just want to update you on some logistical stuff that as far as our website and then our operations guide. So first, if you'll share my screen on our website, been visiting with Dana, trying to figure out what's the best way to communicate some information to our public. but yet keeping it doable for her. We don't want to go with lesser information. We want to provide as much as possible, but keep it feasible. Right now, we have two pieces of information on our website. We have the COVID dashboard, which if you click on that, that takes you to this piece, which hasn't been updated this year yet. But this basically has this bit of information about exposures and quarantines and positives. And that's done on a weekly basis. This was done last year on Friday. Dana and her staff would update it. So we missed out on some things during the week as far as informing our public. Another piece we had was the individual and building positive cases. So this was a case-by-case situation where they would go through and log case by case. So what we decided to do, what we started doing last year was recording the information in a spreadsheet such as this. And this is what I would create those charts for you that I report to you on a weekly basis on. But now this, instead of providing those other two tools, this does all of that in one snapshot, and they're doing this anyhow. So we'll provide the link on our website to this spreadsheet in a view-only mode. So people can click on that on our website. We'll take down those other two pieces and archive them, and then put this on there as an active link that they can go on and see this information. And what this information entails is you'll see it has the isolations. And Dana, I'll let you go into this in more detail. She'll explain, because there's a difference between isolations, and this column is positive cases. And then there is a section for quarantines, and we separate it out by school exposure versus community exposure. And I'll explain that more in depth as we talk about our operations guide, because we're separating that out as well when we talk about some of our test to stay and test to play protocols. And then we have total quarantines, and then we also have the cumulative cases that are ongoing throughout the year, and then we're adding the cumulative quarantines to that as well for a new piece of data. So Dana, would you like to take a minute, kind of go through and explain each of these categories?
Sure. So first of all, you'll see the isolations on there, and that number will always include your active positive cases, but it also includes any students that have those 2 or more symptoms that they are now out of school for because they are sick enough that we need to either one, test or stay home in isolation for those 10 days. Okay, so they don't have to test, but then they have to stay home for those 10 days. So that number is under isolation. So that includes both of those. So then when you move over to your active cases, that's where you'll get your actual positive cases that are active right now. So it's not the cumulative, that's just the active cases. So all of those active cases are in the isolations on the left side also. Does that make sense?
Right. So for example,
Yes.
on this first date, 8/18, we had one student or staff, it doesn't segregate out, who had symptoms. So they were tested, their test came back positive. So you'll notice here, this is where they are total active cases. We have one. So everything in the red column will always be included in the orange column. So now a better example is if you go down to the next day, there's 4 isolations, but only 3 positives. So that means we're still waiting on either one test result. So if someone has symptoms and either they refuse to be tested and they have to go and isolate, or they haven't got their test results back yet, but they have been tested. So everything in the red will always be included in the orange. It's not a cumulative of both of them. It includes all of them in the orange. So for instance, on that day, it's not 7, it's 4 total. 3 were confirmed positives. 1 has not been confirmed positive yet or refused to test.
Right. Right. And then as you move over, you'll notice then we go to our quarantines, and those are all just current active quarantines. So you can see it for each building. As we move over then we get to the cumulative active cases, I believe. So that number will actually be your cumulative number for each building. So it's always going to build upon itself through the school year. Okay. And then as you move over this one, we just added today. So I've not been able to go back and backtrack those numbers yet, but we're going to start trying to give you those cumulative numbers for quarantines as well.
So again, just real quick to emphasize, so I know it's a lot of numbers up there. These, at one given point, you could go and look and say, that's why these numbers changed. On this particular date here, we had 3 positive cases that were due to outside of school exposure. Then you'll notice it goes down to 0, because as those cases recover, they come off the positive case list. That's why these are just a running cumulative daily snapshot. So we can go to a particular day and say, on this day, we had X number of cases, positive cases. But that doesn't total them up and tally them up as we go. So that's why we added this particular column over here, which says this one, you'll notice it keeps getting bigger as we have. So we've had 6 total cases in our school system. None of those were due to school exposure. They were all came from outside exposure. And that's why we divide these into 2 columns, so we could look and see how much of that is transmission within the school system, how much of that was done out in the community, and then brought into the school. So that's a testament to Dana and her team and our staff as well for monitoring those kids, working with those kids and staff members, helping them if they have symptoms to coach them and test them and get them isolated as soon as possible without exposing more. And also just a mitigation protocol in place that we're doing as far as the testing, the cleaning, and the screenings and so forth. So obviously what they're doing is working. So far, we've had 0 cases in the school, only 6 cases total. We're still here, we're still operating, we're still playing activities, and you've seen what's happened all around us and in the state as a whole. So good job, Dana and your team and the rest of the staff.
Well, and Brenda and I will always be updating that on a daily basis. But, if you look at today, it's not in there yet. Sometimes it's 10 o'clock at night when that gets updated, but we will be updating it daily.
So this gives a better snapshot to our community. It's a daily instead of waiting to the end of the week to see it as well. Plus, it's cumulative of all the data instead of just pieces of the data. So we like that better, so we'll put that link on there. Because of that now, I want to update you on our operations guide. So this is pretty much the same. Remember, you've approved this already, but we said it would be flexible. And anytime we update it, we'll bring it back to you to look at to make sure you don't have to reapprove it every time. You just need to make sure you're familiar with it and that there's no objections to it. But this is pretty much the same as you did before, but what we changed was, as advised from the health department, I put together this flow chart to make it easier to understand. So basically, it's separated out based on school-based exposure and then community or household exposure. So think of it in terms of opportunity to be re-exposed. So if someone in your household is exposed, there's a different concern from the health department as opposed to someone who's just exposed to a one-time situation or a limited time situation. So that's why we divided up in these 2 flow charts and working with the health department and KDHE. If you're quarantined due to a school exposure, so meaning anytime you're in school or at a school activity, then we will use those rapid antigen tests that are only an antigen test, they're not a molecular test, so they're not as accurate as a molecular test. But it's what we have to use, and it's the next best thing. So we'll use those on a daily testing regimen that our health department, our health personnel, Dana and her team, will test those kids every morning or those staff members every morning, and they can stay in school then as long as they're symptom-free and they have a negative test. Now, if it's a situation where the exposure is greater, for instance, like if it's someone at home, so they have every night they go home, there's a positive in the household, or it's a situation where they rode, let's say, in a car for 4 hours with someone who's positive, so the chance of infection was greater than just a chance exposure. That's where it'll go over here to this column, and then it will be evaluated by each person, and each case will be evaluated by the health department. And they'll tell us that, okay, yes, this is a situation where you can just use the antigen testing because of the individual characteristics of that particular case or exposure, and it will move over here to this, which will basically become in this column. Or they'll say, well, it's a higher risk, it's a greater exposure, or there's more frequent exposure. So it's going to go over here and they'll have to use a molecular test, a rapid molecular test. Now, the reason we put this on here is because we do not have the ability to do that here in our school system, but we'll work with the health department. They have a machine, and we'll see if the hospital will be available as well to work with us on sending them there. They have 2 machines. So if they determine that its exposure is great enough where it needs a molecular test in order to stay in school and learn and play, then they'll go to the health department to test in that 15-minute rapid test with a molecular and then come here. It may be a point where they only need to do it once or twice, and we can fill in the gaps with the antigen test. So that's where this form will come in, because the health department will tell us that. We'll prepare it for us. So let's say I'm quarantined due to exposure. They'll look at my case. they'll go through and determine if I can just be on the school-based antigen testing and I can go to Dana every morning and get my rapid antigen test, or if I need to go to the health department or hospital and get a rapid molecular test. And then they'll write on here the frequency of that. Maybe I just need to go the first day, the 5th day, and the last day to do the molecular test, and all the days in between, I can just use the antigen test here in school. So that will be based on the circumstances of that case. There's a lot of different parameters that go into that based on those circumstances, especially in a home-based quarantine situation. If there's a positive in the home, do they have the ability to isolate within their home? Are there separate bathrooms? Are there different rooms that they stay in? You know, if it's a sibling has to share the same room with multiple other siblings, there's no choice. There's a lot better chance of exposure than if maybe someone has a room they can isolate in the whole time. And they don't maybe have little kids they have to care for or vice versa. There's just so many parameters. It's an individual case.
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate that this is only for school-based guidelines. So anybody, you know, that is in quarantine, these guidelines will only apply for school events or school itself.
So if it's a rec issue, let's say rec football is a good example. That's not, Dana will not be there Saturday morning and testing rec kids to stay and play. That's a health department issue. This is only for school-based exposures and school-based activities. So we'll make sure we're clear on that because there is a difference there.
Can you reiterate if we're testing kids, what the parental
Absolutely.
permissions need
Yep.
to be, please?
So this is an opt-in only, meaning that a parent has to sign a consent form in order for us to do what's on this flow chart. So if a parent chooses not to do that, or a student chooses not to do that, and they don't sign the consent, they can quarantine at home like they normally would and not be in school. So this is just an added layer to help keep kids and staff in school if they choose to sign a consent form to be tested.
And we still are we're hoping that we can still get those molecular machines. You know, I'm trying to get 3 of them and thought I was gonna get 3 of them. And then found out that, you know, with Delta and everything kind of getting busy again, and we weren't able to get those right now, but I'm hoping down the line that we will. And that way it's easier for kids to just come to school and do all their testing with us and not have to be remembering which place they're going.
Yeah. And so I also put down in the corner of each of these documents, little watermarks, so you can see when they're updated. So this one was created and we finalized it today. And that's why we're bringing it to you now. And then it pairs, it basically reiterates the information in here in this guideline. That's where this has the same watermark down at the bottom. This was updated on 8/30. So any questions on that? All right. The other thing real quick, I just want to thank Mary Kay, Tina Ray, Deidre, and everyone that was at Becky and Tom and Mike, all those that helped with the cookout. Thank you very much for that. I think it was very successful. We had a great turnout. And congratulations to the Lay family. That was great. Thank you, Kelly and Jay, for helping get that organized and your words, Kelly, that day on track. That was awesome.
Kate was there
Yep, Kate. Thank you, Kate. That's
and
right.
Lance.
Lance, yeah. So takes a village, that's for sure. So appreciate everybody's involvement to make that happen. I hope we can continue to do that in the future, because I think that's a great event to just thank our community for their support for the school system and have a little fellowship and celebrate the Braves on opening day for a home opener. And then the last thing real quick, we'll have part of our ESSER 3 application. We turned in our ESSER 2 application. We received approval from the State Department. It will now go to the State Board of Education for approval in their next meeting. And then we'll start working on ESSER 3 now, which is the last round of those funds and there's a totally different parameter behind that. One piece of that is we have to do a survey to stakeholders to see what they would like to see, what that money could be spent on. And so we're developing a survey for that we'll send out. It'll be posted on our website. It'll be posted on our Facebook page, as well as a blast to our parents. So spread the word. If you'd be looking for that when they see it, it's just an opportunity for them to go in and get some input on things that they perceive some needs might be our district that were COVID related that we could backfill with some of those COVID funds. We have some things in place already that we fit those guidelines. And I think we'll see a big parallel amongst those, but we're always open for more suggestions and ideas. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Board members? Anything?
Sure. Mr. Doty, myself, Deidre, Marie, and Jamie Johnson went to Manhattan 2 weeks ago. And the Commissioner of Education was there, Dr. Watson, and we had a conversation regarding Kansas Can and what that looks like. Last time they did the tour was 20-something communities where him and Brad Neuschwander went around the state and asked questions of community members, school board members, students about what we need to be doing to educate our kids so that they can be viable within our communities and within our state, improve our graduation rates and those kind of things. So this time there were 50+ locations. The tour just wrapped up at the end of last week and went around the state. I know that the numbers were above 4,000 participants from across the state this year that attended. And it was a really great opportunity for us to provide information and dialogue, not only talking between those people that were sitting at our table and around the room, but also an opportunity then for us to use an app and provide input. And then they're taking all of those results from across the state back to be analyzed and utilized to look at what we can do for students moving ahead so that we can educate our kids, keep them within our state, and raise the level of not only our graduation rates, but what our kids are doing as certificates 2-year, 4-year beyond, and contributing back to our communities.
Very good.
Some great conversation and great data to be informed on. And those are the things we need to be talking about. Those are the things that the narrative in the state of Kansas needs to be talking about. Our graduation rate has risen statewide, not only locally, but statewide. Our subgroups within those graduation rates have risen statewide. There's a lot of great things going on in education that are getting overshadowed that we need to bring to the forefront, because that's what it's about. That's what we're here to do, to educate kids. Give kids opportunity in post-secondary and out in the workforce and in trade schools and vocational schools. Get them community service opportunities, get them civically engaged. And all those things are measured on our accreditation system. And we're doing fantastic things in those areas, locally and as a state. So those are the things we should be celebrating, most definitely.
That's great. It's great really seeing that, you know, overall as a state that Kansas, our graduation rates have went up 4%. And when you look at that overall, that doesn't seem like that's a great deal. But then when you break it down by students that maybe English isn't their first language, or when you break it down by minority students and other things like that, those numbers exponentially have went up. So we're seeing that public education is working in the state of Kansas, and it's a good thing, very good thing.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? All right, moving on then to an informational item of commercial general liability insurance. What a fun topic.
So I just want to point out to make everybody aware, because this is important. EMC is our general liability insurance carrier, and they insure the majority of the schools in the state of Kansas. There's only very few companies that write riders for public education. EMC is the largest one, and they are ours as well. They did this year issue an exclusion policy for communicable disease. So what that means is now, if we have a situation where we are in litigation over anything centered around a communicable disease, then we will no longer be covered under liability insurance for that. So an example of that is the way litigation works is if we would have to go to court over a communicable disease and we were negligent, and the judge would ask, the way it's been explained to me by our attorneys at KSAB is that it's a 3-tiered system. They ask you, are you following federal guidelines? If you're not, are you following state guidelines? If you're not, are you following local guidelines? And if you're not, and you lose, in whatever restitution's issued to the plaintiff on that, we will no longer be paid for through our insurance carrier. That will be paid from us and our general fund dollars. And so there's a big exposure to the district by not following regulations, and we open ourselves up to risk then that we no longer have coverage for in this category. So I just wanted to point that out because that's important. This is new this year. It hasn't been this way in the past. And all insurance carriers are doing that. It's just not EMC. It's all of them because of the exposure that they're getting from inconsistencies across the board by companies and school districts who are doing different things. And so they just took themselves out of the playing field and said, we are excluding communicable diseases, because if you're doing the right thing, you won't lose the suit. If you're not doing the right thing, you lose, we're not paying the bill for you. I just want to point that out. We don't need to act on it because we have no choice in the matter. I just want to make sure everybody was aware of this because it's a big deal in terms of our liability insurance coverage. Any questions on that?
I should know this, but was that in our packet? I'm pretty sure I saw it, right?
Yeah.
Just that page. Okay, I just wanted to go back and review it. I'm pretty sure I already read it.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions on that? All right, moving on to discussion item of Ford Transit.
So Bryce, I sent you, he put some information together about why we need another transit. Problem is, can't get them. So they stopped production for 21. 22 models they haven't priced them out yet, so we don't even know what a 22 model will cost, plus they're in limited supply. Bryce had heard through his channels that they are hopefully going to limit the sales of those to schools and other government agencies. So we're hoping we can get them. But what I'd like for you guys to do is approve the purchase of one. So if we find a used one, which is not going to happen, but you never know, if we find a good used one, we need to be able to grab it right then and there. And then when the bids come out, when they do open up pricing for bids for state purchases, we need to get on the list like it's the day it happens, the minute it happens, because the list is going to be a mile long. Because every school district in the state, due to the lack of drivers, and the bus drivers are going to transits. And because you can hire anybody to drive a transit, you don't have to have a CDL. So we want to go ahead and get that approved tonight. So when we can get one, the other option that we're looking at, we're having some conversations about it. You can buy a 14-passenger bus. It's not a bus like we're thinking of as our chassis we're used to on the school buses, but they're categorized as a bus. They're not a van, but they're retrofitted basically. It's a different chassis. It's a Chevy's chassis is, I don't remember what it is. It's a Cummins, I think it's a Cummins chassis, but Ford is a Starbright chassis. And what they do is they go and retrofit them and make them a 14-passenger activity bus is what they label them as, but you can use them for routes. It's like what you see the county driving up and down the roads, that white bus, they're those style of buses. Again, they'll hold 14 kids and a driver, and you do not have to have a CDL for those as well. But here's the caveat, they're $65,000. So we can go buy a regular bus for that off lease and haul 50 kids, but you have to have a driver with CDL. We could buy 2 transits for that price, but we can only haul 9 kids and we can't buy transits. So we're trying to explore the cost ratio and the benefit of, do we go ahead, because we can get those right now. There's a dealer who has 5 left and we can get one of those. Well, we could have as of last week. I don't know. They're going fast too. There's no other options for people right now. But if we could get one of those, we could haul more kids. And so right now we run into some situations where there's maybe 10 kids and a coach that needs to go. Well, they can't take a transit. So they have to take a bus. So then we have to hire a bus driver to take it. Whereas if we went with this route, then we could have the coach drive, whether it's like the Bravettes, or it's not a huge bus that someone would probably be uncomfortable driving. It's more of a van style. So there's some benefits to that too. It's just the cost of, it's double the price of 2 transits, or it's the price of a regular bus. So it's kind of hard to pull the trigger on a $65,000 14-passenger bus when we could go buy 2 transits for that. So that's what we're kind of talking about now, but we'd like to have approval at least to buy the transit. And then if we decide that 65-passenger bus or that 14-passenger bus may be the way to go, just because we can get them now and it gives us a few more options and flexibility in hauling teams, we bring that back to you if that's what route we decide to go.
Do you have an approximate cost for a used transit that we could put on there as a maximum, or?
Not a clue. We put out some RFPs to get some pricing, but that's where we found out they don't even have the price list out. Dealers can't even price out a 22 yet. They don't know what they're going to cost them. I imagine it's probably going to be somewhere in the high 20s. They were in the low to mid 20s before. So I imagine a new transit off bid list will probably be around 27 to 30.
If it's on the state bid list, a new one will be much cheaper than a used one.
Yeah, right. Yeah. 'Cause right now it's supply and demand. But every once in a while you get lucky.
But what you'd like to have right now is approval to buy a used one if it comes available, or be put on the bid list.
Right. Or yeah, we go ahead and spec out and purchase or get one ordered, because they'll have to build it and it'll take some time to get here. Yeah. So just to basically approval to purchase a transit, whether it be new or used, and used at a reasonable price. We wouldn't go spend $30,000 on the used one. We just wait till the new ones come out.
Okay.
But if we could pick up a good used one that's only a few years old with 20,000-30,000 miles on it for 18,000, that'd be a good purchase. We want to get it.
Okay. Questions?
Mr. President, I move we approve the purchase of a Ford Transit used or new on the bid list. Within reason. I understand what the car market's doing.
Second that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the purchase of Ford Transit. And just to be clear, it's a good used one or potentially a new one. Any other discussion on that item? All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? All right, action items. The first one of those is the FBLA trip.
Turn that over to Miller over there.
Well, we're looking just for approval to go out of state. They're putting on the national FBLA. They changed. Normally we have 3 locations that you can go to fall leadership. And this year they dropped it down to 2. And those options are Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Orlando, Florida. And so the state kind of got together, and there is a Santa Fe Trail graduate that works and owns Factor 110 in Oklahoma City. So he is kind of gearing up and made our own little Kansas State fall leadership in Oklahoma City. Gonna allow set up tours of different businesses downtown. He has a cost. I sent that flyer as the attachment. He had the cost of $65 to be a part of that, and then we would find our own hotels on our own. It wouldn't be like in a huge conference, kind of like it normally is. But I guess that's in November. We wanted to start the process now to see if it was an option, if we would be allowed to travel out of state with COVID and take kids out of state. So that's our first action item.
Normally, it's an awesome opportunity. I just think it'd be working with the parents, what their comfort level is, or with kids going out of state, and making sure we probably have some sort of liability waiver in place where if the kid is exposed there, that they know the risk of going into a large group of people, especially we don't know what November is like. And we probably better put some parameters in place, revisit it closer, but I know that puts you in a hard crunch, because if you got to register and send off several $1,000s in registrations, it's difficult. So.
And I mean, at least at one point, right, Dana, the crowd was 500. I don't really imagine there'll be 500 Kansas students there, to be quite honest. I could be wrong. I haven't heard. I'll try to find that out before the next one, but I would be hard to believe that there'd be 500 of us there.
And the travel quarantine list, it gets updated every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to forecast the future on it, but Oklahoma's not on there right now, so.
Well, and I would trust Ms. Miller to work with the parents and communicate with parents to get that input from them, and work with the parents, and then work with Dan as well to keep abreast on any travel quarantine guidelines or any other health guidelines, and let them work it out. If it's feasible to go, I think it's a good opportunity for kids. Absolutely.
Has KSDE put out any guidance around anything like this?
Nope.
They're probably not going to.
Nope. Yeah, touch that.
That was a good question. Yeah.
We wish.
Yeah.
My question then goes to, I'm assuming we'd be using school transportation to get them there. So the students would understand that they have to wear their masks. And then with this being a school event, would they be required to be masked up at the event?
Whatever their guidelines are there would be what would be mandatory. Now, we could set our own guidelines for them to go, but since it's out of state and it's not in Morris County, then it would be whatever the county that this event is in would be whatever their restrictions are. Now, we could set parameters and say we want them to wear a mask the whole time. But
we're not doing that right now.
No. And so the bus situation, though, is a federal mandate, so that would not be an option. They would have to wear, anytime on any public transportation, have to wear a mask.
I just wanted to bring those two issues to point. So
yeah, we are not requiring anything out of Morris County for kids to be masked. Now, our coaches, I think, are doing it voluntarily, just so they don't want their kids to be quarantined in the situation. But it's not required.
Scott, did you have something?
I was going to make a motion when it says the discussion's done. So
I think we're there, man.
All right, Mr. President, I move we approve the FBLA chapter to travel to Oklahoma City for their leadership training seminar and observe the local guidelines at the event.
Second it.
All right, moved and seconded that we approve the FBLA trip. Discussion on that, further discussion on that item. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Super. So the next one looks like FFA wants to take a trip as well.
Taylor, give any feedback to anybody share tonight?
No, he was ill today.
Okay.
He was ill today, and I guess I didn't check with him before coming over here either. He did send something through. He tried to provide information
Let me find it here.
as requested.
It's in the back.
Yeah.
Looks like it's in late October in Indianapolis.
She did.
So I assume kind of same thing, looking for approval to go out of state. Guidelines would obviously be a conversation item. Closer, if that changes.
This year, we don't have a student necessarily participating, but there will be recognition for those that were candidates for that possible participation. He had shared that, at least in the email he sent out.
Yeah, I'd say we use the same guidelines that we just talked about for.
He did tell me that they've already put out that mask will be mandatory.
Okay.
He told me.
And I'll work with Dana. I think we need to get some sort of liability waiver that the parents recognize the risk involved and let them sign that, and it's their choice. And go from there.
Okay. Thoughts on the FFA trip?
Making a motion, Miles?
I was gonna suggest that we, instead of making one liability for each event, we make one liability for every out-of-state overnight event, et cetera, that highlights the exposure and the risk of getting COVID-19.
I think someone's gunning for your job. Nope.
Yep, that's a
absolutely.
great idea.
Yeah, that's a great.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right, Scott, I see your video again.
Yep, Mr. President, I move that we approve the FFA chapter to be able to attend the National Convention in Indianapolis with observance of the local regulations and guidelines.
I'll second it.
All right, moved and seconded that we approve the FFA trip to Indianapolis, again with the local guidelines and regulations. Further discussion on that item? All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Adam, were you a yes or a no there? You're
Sorry, I'm a yes. I just didn't get my camera turned back on in time.
just wanted to make sure. I figured that was the case. All right, next one. A request for religious mask exemption. Adam, I'll let you run with this.
Sure. Yeah, I asked for this to be put on because of the discussion that took place. Mr. Doty, I believe we had a request from a parent. The more I thought about this, the more I don't think that we need to wade into these waters at all and deny this, because we don't have jurisdiction over religious exemptions. It's a governmental regulation of religious beliefs. And if we as a board feel that we're going to deny this, then I think that we need to get a legal opinion from KASB. And if we're going to vote on this tonight, I'm going to abstain my vote.
Well, I did get legal advice. That's what I sent you all. KCB said it's your choice. There is no religious, there's no guidelines that mandate religious exemptions for this. So it is the board's choice. So far that I know, there's 2 school districts in the state of Kansas, Salina and Olathe, that are offering it out of the 286. So it's your choice as the Board of Education, what you do.
Have we still just had the one inquiry, not really even an application, if you will, but an inquiry?
But they don't have a method to apply.
Right.
So if she wanted to, she couldn't apply. But yeah, we would have one inquiry from a parent.
Okay. Anybody have thoughts? What direction we'd like to go here? Anybody want to make a motion? So let me just be straight here. If we don't do anything, if we don't have a motion here, we're going to continue with the practice as it is without taking any formal action.
So
And
Mike-
I'm perfectly okay with that, but
So the question is then, if we make no motion, we have no vote on this, are we denying this or are we going to accept this?
Well, we're not denying anything because we do not have an avenue for religious exemptions. So if you wanted to create an avenue for religious exemptions, you'd have to make a motion to do that. And then I would work with Dana and Public Health to create that. But right now, we have no avenue for religious exemptions, so for a mask mandate. So as of right now, we are not allowing them. If you want to allow them, we need to have a motion to allow that and be approved, and then I'll create that and put that in place.
I make a motion that we allow religious exemptions for masking for staff and students.
I'll second.
all right, we have a motion to allow religious exemptions for masking for staff and students. Discussion on that item. All right, I'll ask one. I've got a question. Oh, go ahead, Miles. Go
I was
ahead.
gonna ask, we don't know too much about a religious mask mandate. How are we able to place it in our system? If we only know of 2 school districts that are doing so, and yet no federal jurisdiction, how can we then put it into our school?
So that's a good question. The Equal Opportunity Employment Commission is what legal counsel bases on, says that personal beliefs, political positions are not a basis for religious exemptions. So that's why our legal advice is that it's up to the school district to do. That's the gist of it. You can choose to do it and choose not to do it. It's your decision as a Board of Education to allow it. That's why when the request came, it was denied. I visited with Dana. We feel it's a safety issue personally, professionally, as a health team and a school district. And so that's why it was denied. If the board decides to make it available, you vote, I'll make it available. So it's a board decision.
So what we're essentially saying that if we do not vote for this, then we are saying that we as a board feel that we can overrule First Amendment rights to students and staff. That's what we're saying. Just so we're clear.
No.
Adam, I'm gonna have to disagree with that. You don't get to put words in my mouth. Sorry. That's what you're saying.
I just have a question because we were under a mandate in Morris County. So we have a mandate for a mask order in Morris County. If someone applies to the school district for a religious exemption, that doesn't remove them from the mask order in Morris County. So I guess I'm not understanding at this point in the conversation where the school district fits into this.
No, I mean, that's just it. I mean, it goes back to whether or not, there is no law that says they have to have it. So it becomes a local decision. There is no law that mandates that religious exemptions are required. So it goes back to the Board of Education and decide whether or not they want to allow that to happen.
So I guess it's my understanding that someone could file or whatever that terminology would be, a religious exemption to Morris County that could then apply in Morris County, but
Would not apply to the school.
right. So I guess I'm not making the connection.
Well, if it helps at all, there is guidance, not guidance, there is law that allows for religious exemption to vaccines. That is in place and followed when we receive those. But there is not laws for this.
Well, and that was going to be the question that I have as I've researched this and talked to a number of clergy people, if I can use that term loosely, what's an example of a religious exemption for the mask? I get it with the vaccine, that I get. But I haven't come up with a good religious exemption for the mask. And I'm open to hearing that. I've looked. But I'd be interested if there's one of those that someone could share with me.
And then I have a question. If we go back to our commercial general liability insurance conversation that we just had, and we allow for this religious mask exemption, what does that do with regards to our liability in the communicable disease exclusion?
That'd be depending on what the judge says and what attorneys are you. I couldn't answer that question because it's a pretty broad stroke. Depends on the circumstances involved on exposure, circumstances involved on the condition of the health and all that stuff.
But there could be a liability associated. The way that
Someone sued McDonald's over hot coffee, so I think there can be liability over anything, and they won. So I don't know. I couldn't answer that. You're right.
That's what
I don't know.
Say, I mean, we have liability. I mean, you're open to lawsuits over anything. You know, somebody slips on the floor, they dump a water bottle and they slip and hurt themselves. We're open to it. My biggest concern is if you deny it, are you opening yourself up to a lawsuit? Vice versa. If we only have, at this point in time, would say one person that's asking for that? Unfortunately, in this day and age in this country, everything is litigious, and if you don't agree with it, but I won't go down that path. But my concern is if we deny it, are we opening ourselves up to more liability than if we just address the one or two that do bring it up?
A couple things are just real quick. I think it's important to point out. I think Tina's great point, what I understood her saying was, we have liability coverage for a lot of things. So if we have a negligent situation and we're sued and we lose, like the hot coffee incident, we are covered by our insurance on that. They will pay whatever that restitution is. That's what that liability insurance is for. The difference though, in this case for communicable diseases is that we do not have any liability coverage. So if we are sued on that and lose, we are paying for that out of our general fund, not insurance to cover that. So I guess equate that to if you had insurance on your car and the health damage comes through, they're going to pay it. Your price to repair was, if you don't have insurance on it, that's all out of pocket. You're paying for it all. So I think that's the difference in those situations.
And the way I hear that as well, if you're in a communicable disease, somebody comes in and gets the flu and gets sick, or something terrible happens, they get anything else, smallpox, they get strep throat, anything, and they have some other underlying disease, we're still vulnerable now, or because they're not going to cover that, because those are communicable diseases.
Right. That is correct.
Well, what does that have to do with religion? That's, yeah.
So I think what we need to be worried about is discrimination, correct, based upon religion, but we're not denying. Right, so we're not denying students services based on their religious beliefs. We're not discriminating about the type of education they get, the quality of education they get, based upon their religious beliefs. So I think if we're violating that discrimination point of Title II of the Civil Rights Act, then we need to have a conversation about that, and we do need to seek legal advice. But at this point, I don't think that there's evidence that we are violating Title II of the Civil Rights Act and that we were discriminating based upon religion.
Well, to clarify, I have seek legal advice on this, and here our KSAB legal staff that told us says the EEOC, which is the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, doesn't protect beliefs merely because they are strongly held. Whether a practice is religious depends on an employee's motivation. Social, political, or economic philosophies, as well as personal preferences, aren't protected as religious beliefs under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So that's what her stance was to the Board of Education, is that it's your choice because those rights are not protected. A mask is not protected underneath those rights. And so it's your choice whether you allow it or not. Just like there's no law that says students can go out of state or can't. It's your choice as a board whether you choose to allow students to go out of state and travel or not. Same scenario here. It's your choice as a board because there's no law that says you have to allow it, and there's no law that says you can't allow it.
All right, further discussion, questions, comments? So to restate, the motion is that we would allow for a religious mask exemption. Adam, am I stating that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. So the motion is that we would allow a religious mask exemption. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Okay. Next item would be the, also, for those that are watching that maybe couldn't see all that, that motion did fail 2-5.
Did you get Miles? vote?
No, he's a non-voting member, so I don't. Yeah.
All right, so the next one would be the KDHE COVID-19 grant.
Any questions on that? Thanks to Dana, a lot of hard work on her part. We wrote this grant and it was approved by KDHE. It's over $350,000 to our school district. They included those things I spoke to you about as far as personnel for the health department, supplies for the health department.
Well, not the health
Yeah,
department.
our health department. I want to clarify. Anything I'm speaking to here is USD 417, not Forest County. Thank you.
Just clarifying.
Yeah, no, that's good. I want to create any misperception. So yeah. So for our health staff at USD 417, includes the testing supplies for the test to stay, the test to play, some office equipment, vehicles for them to do if they need to do home-based testing and whatnot, or run errands back and forth between schools to transfer supplies and so forth. And includes the $25 gift certificates for those who have been vaccinated or get vaccinated that would run through the Educational Enhancement Fund. All this money will come from, and also we got air purifiers that will distribute throughout high traffic flow areas, commons areas, offices, locker rooms. Pretty substantial grant, pretty neat thing. So a lot of good we'll be able to put into place there to help mitigate some COVID practices.
Okay. So what kind of an action do you need?
Just need approval to accept the grant.
Okay.
I have a question about the grant.
Okay.
I have a question about the grant. What are the, there's no free money really. So what are the things that we must do? Is it just that the funds need to be appropriated to the things that are outlined that Mr. Doty outlined for us?
Correct. So we had to turn in a budget and apply. So on the grant process, application process, we had to turn in a budget for what we wanted. So Dana had to say, hey, I need additional health staff member. It's going to cost X amount of dollars. We need air purifiers and we need X number of them at X amount of dollars. And so everything was turned into the state. They approved that and told us it's been approved. Now we can spend the money. And then Micah will then go in and draw down off there's a website for all federal and state grants that we have to go into and draw those funds down as we spend them. So we spend them, turn in the invoice, they reimburse us for it.
Can we talk about the air purifiers real quick? What is that a big project? Is that replacing all the HVAC systems? What does that kind of look like?
No, they're portable units that will go and set that have four-stage filtration system. They have an ion filter in them. They have a carbon filter. They have a large particle filter, and then they have a HEPA filter in them. So they're a four-stage system. We propose to get two different styles, a big one that will cover 1,100 square feet. Those will go in locker rooms, larger areas, and then smaller ones that do up to 600 square feet will be placed in like the health offices, smaller office areas, classrooms where we may have higher risk students, band room where it's in vocal music room where there's higher exacerbations of particles. They're high-end units. They're very expensive. They're not just your typical go to Walmart and buy or a big box store and buy a HEPA filter air device. These are $1,500 to $2,000 units that are higher end, very professional grade, commercial grade unit.
And this would cover all the buildings.
It won't cover every classroom in all the buildings, but it will cover all the high traffic areas in all the buildings, yes. So like all the buildings will get them, but it won't be a one-to-one for every classroom.
Right.
And the budget also covered filters, like change out
Right.
filters.
HEPA filters are very expensive. And so in that we put in for 3 years, basically filters as well. So they'll be expense-free for the district for the next 3 years in these filtration units. It's about $70,000 worth of equipment just for the air purifiers alone.
Yeah, it's my understanding that this is one of the absolutely best tools that we have against coronavirus spread is the filtering. So I just wanted some more information about that. So thank you.
Yeah, there's 3 types, Adam, and we looked into, there's the UV light one that will pull, but UV filtration, for lack of better terms, only works for the air you pull through, expose the light to. But UV light's dangerous to us. So you just can't have a big UV light in a room because it's dangerous to individuals. So you can only use that in down times, like when no one's in the room, or have a self-contained unit that has a fan that pulls air in into a tube with UV lights that disinfect it and kill the bacteria and then exit it. So they're highly effective, but they're very expensive, and they're only, like, they sell some units that go up in the ceiling and pull air in, but the air turnover, the air exchange is what you want to look at. How many times can it exchange the air in the room, and how often can it do it? So those, you'd have to have a ton of them in a room to be effective, and you're talking $10,000 to $15,000 per room if you got those types to do it. There's a CO2, or not CO2, can't remember the name, ozone generator filter, ozone that kills bacteria, attaches to it. But those are dangerous to humans as well. You can't breathe it. You have to do that and then exhaust the room of the ozone before it is inhabited by individuals. So this is the safest and one of the most effective means is what I found in this unit. Because the HEPA filter alone is good, but this includes carbon filters, HEPA filters, big particle filters, and the ion generation filter. So I think these of all, we do a ton of research. We've been researching these for a year now, and this is the best unit that we found overall. So we're excited about them. I think it's gonna be good.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions, comments on the grant?
Motion to accept the grant?
Yep.
To participate in
Just
the
accept the
grant?
grant.
So, Mr. President, I move that we accept the grant award from KDHE for COVID-19 funding.
Moved and seconded that we approve the grant from KDHE for COVID-19 funding. Discussion on that item? All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? All right, the next one is the K-Jump settlement.
So we just need a motion to accept the settlement. If we want to discuss it, we need to go into executive session on it because there's a non-disclosure agreement that the attorneys put together that we can't discuss in public. But that's just to keep other lawsuits from bouncing up. So basically, it just reduced our payment from the 30-some thousand down to $2,000-some dollars. So very, very positive outcome.
Yes.
We just need a board motion accepted because Terry, you have to sign the acceptance form.
That's a lot of pressure. Discussion on that item? Go ahead, Scott.
President, I move we accept the K-Jump settlement.
I second that.
We moved and seconded that we approve the K-Jump settlement. Discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? All right, and then we need a KSB delegate.
The nominated voting delegate.
Mr. President, I move we select Deidre Knight as our delegate to represent the district at KSB's delegate assembly in November and December.
Moved and seconded that we elect Deidre to be our KSB delegate. I guess my question is, are you okay with that?
Yes, I'm okay. We'll find out by then if I'm still gonna be here in this seat, but for the time being, I would like to do that, yes.
And if we need an alternative, I'll be attending the conference as well, so we can always list an alternative.
All right. Any other discussion on this item? All right, so again, it's been moved and seconded that we elect Deidre to be our KSB delegate. All in favor, raise your right hand.
Can I vote?
Yeah.
Okay.
All opposed? All right, looks like we got a little bit of an executive session for personnel. How much time do you think you need there?
15.
15 minutes. We do not expect there to be any action when we come out. Mr. Doty, I think, in the board. Yeah.
Mr. President, I move we go into an executive session to discuss an individual employee's performance pursuant to non-elected personnel exemption under COMA with Mr. Doty and the board for 15 minutes.
I second that.
Moved and seconded, 15-minute executive session for personnel. Discussion, all in favor, raise your right hand.
Might give it a couple minutes, everybody to clear out stuff.
Yep, we'll start that at, we'll start it exactly at 7:15 with executive
Thank
session.
you, Miles.
Thank you.
That way people
Thank you, everyone, for having me.
You guys have a good week.
Sorry. Hey, Val. You just want to set it in here?
I was gonna say, can I just sit down on a chair out here?
Yeah. I'll try that. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Yes,